And you have made it to episode 62 of CUZZO-OP. My name is Isaiah Velez, also known as IV. Gave you the whole government. That's kind of crazy. And I'm joined by my brother and my cousin, as usual.
Willie Vega, also known as Arrow.
Dang, he gave the whole government. We outside. You know what I mean? We here. It's episode 62 of CUZZO-OP. And we've got a special one. Another special one. One thing we do here at CUZZO-OP, we're always talking about TV, we're always talking about movies, and we're always talking about video games. But sometimes the best thing you can do to truly show love to a medium is to not just look at movies for what they are, TV shows for what they are, or even video games, but really look at the creators behind them, behind that piece of entertainment. And tonight, if you've seen the title, obviously you have, then you're here to listen to us go off about a director that has a established name, a name for a number of years, 20, 30 years. This name has been known in Hollywood, has worked with some of the biggest actors and actresses that we see in movies and TV and even video games today. And so it's an important conversation for us to have. We are talking about no other than the one and only Guy Ritchie. Guy Ritchie, yes sir, yes sir. So Willie, when you think Guy Ritchie and you think of, okay, this was on the schedule weeks ago, how much did you have to go watch movies for this? How much do you know about Ritchie? Is he important to you? What's your relationship with him?
So in terms of movies that he has made, before we decided to put this on the schedule a few weeks ago, I had seen 3 of his films, 3 out of 14. He has 14 and one coming up. In fact, that's why we're doing this, to celebrate the release of his new film.
Yes, sir.
So I had a lot. I had to go watch 11 movies, and I actually ended up watching 13 just because I had to rewatch 2 of the ones that I had already seen. And the one that I didn't need to rewatch, I didn't realize was him until doing research for this episode. So in terms of before this, I would say there was no relationship here. I didn't know. I've heard his name.
Sure.
I've seen what movies he's done. I knew he did the Sherlock Holmes. I knew he did the King Arthur, and I knew that he was just known, but I had never sought out his product. And little tease to come for this episode, I've now sat through all of his films, some multiple times, some not. And I don't know if there is a relationship here still. So it'll be interesting to talk, because you were very adamant about, let's get this episode in. And, I'm going to sit here, and if you want to do an episode, bro, I'm going to find a way to make it happen so that we could do it, because I love talking and hearing different opinions come from you. And I just like to see what maybe you could change my mind about how I feel, or I can just get you to understand, even if we're not trying to change each other's minds, where I'm coming from and why I feel the way I feel, even if I sometimes can't explain it as well as maybe you. But I'll be interested to have this conversation, because there are things that I am ready to talk about. So how about you? Where do you fall in line with the Guy Ritchie?
Well, I think I'm biased slightly. Back in college, we made it a thing to go and study this guy's movies. We had a movie club, a couple of us, in our 20s, and then some of the mentors and older guys that had families living on campus, they would come around as well. We would just watch movies. We did Denis movies, Nolan's movies, and then, of course, we did Ritchie. So I would say kind of in that order of Nolan, Denis, then Ritchie. Guy Ritchie's actually like my 3rd favorite director for a number of reasons, which we'll talk about tonight. We'll talk about today. Yeah. We'll talk about this afternoon, wherever you listen, however you listen. But that's kind of my impression coming into this conversation. I've seen most of all these movies, the ones that really, really matter and really are important. I've seen them 5-6 times because I love the pace of a good Ritchie movie. So let's dive in, bro. Let's dive in. Usually what we do here, if you've listened to this season's episode of Denis Villeneuve, or last season's Christopher Nolan, we go through the entire filmography from the ground up. Just making little stops here and there for those that may not be as significant of movies, but there are a good 10 movies or so that we've got to talk about tonight, at least, give a little bit of thoughts on for real. So what I'll do is just kind of go one by one. How about that? And then we just kind of give our bare thoughts and keep it pushing. Do we want to do ratings tonight? That's the question. How do you feel?
I mean, I've got ratings, I've got personal feelings, but I am a firm believer that my true rating can only really come after I've seen a movie twice.
Fair.
And so do what you will, host.
Fine. Just checking the vibes. So first and foremost, we start off with, I said he's been out here for 30 years. 1995's The Hard Case, which is his short. Did you watch the short?
I did not. I only stuck to like directorial debuts for Full Scale.
Fair.
Things like that. So I did not catch any of his shorts.
Let's go straight to 98 then. Let's get straight to Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. This movie, man, this was I'd seen a bunch of his movies up until 2019, 2020, and then went back and watched this after seeing all of those other movies. I think after I had seen The Gentleman, I was like, oh, I got to go back. What's your thoughts on this, bro? What did you think about Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels? Did you enjoy it? Did you have fun with it? I know you have some thoughts. I know this is going to intro those thoughts. I want to hear those thoughts about production credits and stuff.
Here's what I'll say to start this conversation regarding this movie. I mean, this is his debut, and it's a fantastic debut. It's one of the better debuts that we've seen, right? It almost kind of feels like this guy came in, and this may have been his third or fourth. With Nolan, we had Following, which, is super duper early Nolan. While here, I've seen online some people feel like he peaked at this point in time. That he came out with a heavy hitter and has fallen off since. Now, this wasn't necessarily my favorite of his films. In fact, I've got a little Guy Ritchie list going on over at Letterboxd, and this falls in at the 8th. But that doesn't necessarily speak to quality. I thought this was a good opener. I thought this was solid. I feel like it's not a 10 out of 10. I just think I can see where his charm and his style is right from this movie.
Right.
And this wasn't the first movie I watched of his. It wasn't even like the 5th or 6th. I went very much out of order.
Right.
So I recognized his style right away. It's his style through and through. Very flashy. And I'm going to save something that I have to say for a few movies down the line. So I'll let you handle this talk, but I think that if someone were to start Guy Ritchie's filmography here, I could see why they'd be like, oh, okay, there's something here that I'd like to continue to see in other works. So I'll let you talk. I do have a little bit more I want to say, but I want you to give your overview first before I talk about one thing that is very interesting about this movie.
Sure. Yeah, I think for me, right, like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels is a good movie in terms of putting on display this man's ability to edit, straight up. His ability to edit. That's his sweet thing, All three of the big three for me when it comes to movies, Nolan, Denis, and Ritchie, they all know how to edit really well. And the dimension of time is something they bend and manipulate in the way that they tell their stories. And who knows, maybe that's a mark of a great director, being that they all have made some really good films. Some think that they're some of the best films. I don't know. All I know is that this movie had that for me. It had a fun plot, cool characters to get involved with, and it established the relationships that Ritchie will have with a number of actors. Statham, obviously, we see him in 4 other Ritchie products, or maybe 3. After this, and I just like the British take. We see this British energy, this gangs and betting and this like underbelly of the crime of a British space. We are going to return here with Ritchie. He loves this place. This is what he grew up, dreaming about making movies about. This is his spy movie. It's like involved with these things. So I like that about this film. But at the same time, I would prefer Snatch over this movie every single time. I think Snatch is like a V2 of this movie in a lot of ways.
Okay.
That's just how I feel.
Before we get to Snatch, I want to make a point that not only is it the start of a relationship between Ritchie and Statham, this is the start of Statham. This was his first role in a film. So it was very interesting to see his beginnings, and it's very cool to see that, like many actors and directors, this dude Statham is now on the line of, like, if Guy's calling, I'm there.
Right.
2023, he's still acting for this dude.
Facts.
So I just thought that was cool because we've made it a point to always talk about when the directors and actors have great relationships. We've seen it with Killian and Nolan, right?
Yeah.
And so
it's cool to see that.
Right.
And they like to work with those people because they know that what they're going to get.
Exactly. You are correct with the editing point. He's a very stylized editor. I think that's his strongest point as a director. He's very interesting in terms of the way he edits. Let's jump into Snatch, bro, right? Is it safe for us to do that?
Sure, jump in.
I agree with you 100%. I think Snatch is, if you take what we were just speaking about and say, double it. And I enjoyed it more.
It's
it
like
falls
the next Iron Man suit. It's like the Mach 3 to the Mach 2 type vibe.
So I enjoyed it more. It's number 6 on my list.
Okay.
And I really liked it. I liked seeing so many of these actors like Brad Pitt or Vinnie Jones, I believe, is in this, right?
Yep.
Let's see. Yeah. You know who I really did like, actually? Lenny James is in this. He's on The Walking Dead. Fantastic. One of the best actors on The Walking Dead. And it was cool to see him in something other than The Walking Dead.
Sure.
Recently I've been trying to find a list of my favorite actors and search what they've been in before. And I'm trying to watch more of Liam Neeson's films and more Rami Malek and Andrew Lincoln. So I've been finding people in different pocket places.
We should follow actors through their movies just like we do directors. That'd be sick.
I think that's a great idea. And so to see him here was also really fun. It made the movie easier for me to watch because I'm like, I just lock in because that's Morgan, bro.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that of all of his films, these crime type movies are the ones that he excels at. It's clear that these are the films that he wants to make, right?
I agree.
So what are your thoughts on this, Mr. V2?
Yeah, bro, I think it's just same type energy. I just really enjoy seeing his heart come alive in these stories. They're wacky, they're fun, they're throwing you for a loop because you're expecting one thing down the timeline, and then a montage will redirect the flow of the story in a way that keeps you off kilter and keeps you feeling like you're in the heist of the moment. I love the idea of a narrator telling a story, and then similar to like a Family Guy flashback, you get the play-by-play of what the person's telling the story of. Yeah, so my brother actually met this brawler, and he would, and you're seeing it play out on screen. He loves to do that storybook kind of concept, and he does it very well, very, very well. That's one of the editing places where he does that well. So I love all the performances. I love the energy. I love that he is establishing this as his thing. Some people would say it's his gimmick, and I can understand that. I can understand you saying that, but we're going to keep talking these movies. And if it were a gimmick, it would feel and do the same thing every single time. I think that it's almost like a muscle that he reveals he has, and then he uses it in a number of different ways as we go forward. So that's why I like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch. That's where he made that known. Now, any last thoughts on Snatch at all? The next would be Swept Away, and I actually did not watch that one. Did you watch that one?
I did.
What did you think about Swept Away?
This is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life.
Respect.
It's number 14 on my list. As we know, Guy Ritchie, in case you don't know, he was actually married to Madonna for a little while, and so he had her be one of the stars in his movie Swept Away, right? And
trash.
This movie was not it. It wasn't. In fact, on Letterboxd, because I have Letterboxd pulled up all the time, I enjoy Letterboxd more than Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and all those things. The highest number out of 10 that it has is a 1. So a lot of people feel that sentiment also. Not that I think you should ever follow what others think. I think it's always important to watch and judge for yourself. But there's something very clear here that states that this ain't it.
Sure.
It's kind of weird, some of it. So I'm perfectly. It doesn't even really feel like his style of movie either. So I don't know if it was
like he was
for Madonna,
he was trying something, or he was doing something. Yeah, I feel you on that.
Right. So that's how I feel about Swept Away. I'm perfectly fine just leaving that on the table.
Sure.
Like I don't think there's much to discuss here. I think it's a hump in the road that he wants to leave in the past, that many of his fans want to leave in the past, and I'm fine leaving that there.
Understandable, my G. Understandable. Yeah, I will not watch that movie, respectfully. Even if he is one of my favorite directors. I'm just not going to watch that. Let's continue the Jason Statham conversation then. Let's move on to 2005's Revolver. I personally enjoy this film. The reason why I enjoy this film is because though it is star-studded with familiars from Ritchie, I would actually say this is the first Statham movie where I felt like we got this one-on-one director treatment for Statham. He's got great co-stars in all the other movies. I think that Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels has much more connection to other storylines at the same time. What I love about Revolver is I see Wrath of Man comes from a lineage of Revolver type movies. So I'm still connecting these pieces where I think Ritchie is a director who bests himself with every film. That he tries to push himself to become better and to use ideas and concepts that he's already come up with just in a better way, becoming a master at doing that more and more. The gangster story, we see that continue to evolve. This idea of Jason Statham is sicked on a group of people for a particular reason. The thing that starts Jason Statham's like whole filmography. That's what he does in almost every movie. He's the one that's been sicked after someone or is going after someone and killing a bunch of people in his way. I think it was cool to see that be introed here. And if you don't know that relationship, then you don't even know that this movie exists because it's way back in the Jason Statham films. So it's just a great action film, still playing with time, still strengthening the muscle. Is it one of my favorites? Not even a little bit. It's like low on the list for me. But I love to see the relationship grow. I think it all leads to where we're going to get to with some of these other movies.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's 13 out of 14 on my list.
Word.
I think Statham as a leading role was cool. I think he was doing things where I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching him. This is the one where he's like, I'm not gonna dive too deep into spoilers, but this is when he can't get on the elevator, right? Yeah. He's stressed. Yeah. He's like, I can't get on the elevator. You gotta let me go around. Yeah, and they're like, nope, you gotta get on. I thought it was all right. I thought it was okay.
It's decent.
Not one of my favorites. In fact, I mean, I don't have many favorites here, but yeah, it just from the first two films in his filmography, this one didn't feel as strong to say like it was even, oh, that's Guy Ritchie. Oh, okay. Like between this and Swept Away, I'm surprised that director jail didn't come into play for him for a while.
Sure.
But maybe that's just a concept that happened more later on in Hollywood.
I think so.
So, I mean, are you done with?
Yeah, Revolver's cool. What about Rock and Roller?
So Rock and Roller is where I feel like the guy who directed Lock and Snatch came back. This is where I really felt his return. Like, I
feel that.
So that's how I feel about Rock and Roller. And even this one is at 12. So, I just think his style,
it's a style.
Talking about his style.
It's a style movie. The story isn't necessarily like, oh, breathtaking. The script isn't necessarily like, oh, amazing. Even the acting is not like, oh, wow, you're going to win an Oscar for this. But it's a fun movie put together well. That's a concept that I feel like happens for Ritchie often. I don't think that he's somebody who gets nominated for Oscars. But when I think of some of the more memorable movie moments and feelings in the movie theater that I get, I think Ritchie's good at giving those types of experiences. At Rock-A-Rolla with Gerard Butler and Idris Elba and all of them is another experience like that. They come together to do that.
Right. I mean, Revolver and Rock and Rolla start another relationship for Guy Ritchie that I personally appreciate. This actor, every time I see him, Mark Strong.
Yeah.
Really enjoy him. So whenever he pops up, I try to lock in. I'm like, oh, I like this dude. So I'm going to say, let me see what you acting about in this film.
Sure.
So that was one thing I did appreciate it. But again, 12, it's just, maybe the genre isn't for me per se. Maybe it's these movies. I'm a big plot dude. I don't need 10 out of 10 plots. One of my favorite movies is Willy's Wonderland. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's ridiculous. Like, I don't need that there. I'm perfectly fine with a fun movie, a good, bad movie, whatever. But that's when I sometimes feel like directors know what they're making. And with these that we've been talking about, it feels like he's aiming for the skies and missing versus just knowing his limits.
That's fair. I respect that. I respect that a lot. I think that's a really good take. And I think that combined with your mentioning of Mark Strong is a good alley into our next movie, where I think for some people, man, he found his footing. And I think this was one of those movies that started it for him in terms of, I think, becoming much more of a household name generationally for us. 2009, Sherlock Holmes. So let's just set the scene. It's been a year since Iron Man has come out. People have already associated Robert Downey Jr.'s redemption story with the Iron Man storyline, and yet there's this project he's working on with Guy Ritchie to play Sherlock Holmes, which is a character almost somewhat, I don't know if Sherlock Holmes and Tony Stark would get along in a room. So we get to see this Robert Downey Jr. side of the spectrum of being this aloof yet brilliant character. And I already have heard some of your thoughts and I want you to voice them. But one of my favorite things about this movie and 2011's Game of Shadows, which I will speak to them kind of in a group at sometimes. I really enjoyed seeing Downey with Jude Law. I liked their relationship. It was one of my favorite takes on the Watson Sherlock story. I'd seen the BBC, seen Elementary on ABC, seen other stories and cartoons and concepts where there's this very like proper person, even epic rap battles of history, this very proper person versus this person who's very messy, yet the proper person is admires the brilliance of the sleuth. They played into that brotherly relationship really well from the beginning of the film. And it is part of the reason why they have me eating out their hand the entire time. I think that is something that evolved out of those gangster movies. This idea of like, what will friends do for one another? This idea of friends will stand like gang against the obstacles in front of them. Ritchie uses this idea in a lot of movies going forward. And I like it in this one. I just like it. I love everything about this movie, bro. I like the slow motion scenes, I'm going to do this, and then the editing style just came in that form. Same editing style stories where you saying what you're going to do or what happened and you seeing it play. Nah, but this time we're seeing him project his vision into the future and then seeing it play out after he says it. So fucking fire, bro. It's so fire. It's so fire. And I think that's another thing about it I enjoy, man. I feel like the slow motion, a lot of people weren't doing that back then. You know, it was, slow motion with gunfights, but this idea of mental vision casting through this kind of editing style. It was a Ritchie ting, baby. It was a Ritchie ting. And we seeing it again after this. People stole that, just so you know. Anyways, I'll let you go. I just geeked out.
Listen, for Sherlock Holmes 2009, just this one. I'm not even talking about
Game of Shadows.
Game of Shadows. This movie, without Downey and Law, loses me. They are the pillars that make this movie what it is for me. Also Mark Strong.
I was about to say, you're walling out. Mark Strong.
Also Mark Strong. But I just more so meant without the connection that they had with each other, the actors are playing off each other really well. I don't know if I would have liked this as much as I do. And I didn't love this, if I'm being truthful. And that's just, I mean, with all of his movies so far, and it's going to continue to be this way, plot doesn't feel like something he takes super important compared to his editing style. And I feel it a little bit, and it hurts a little bit for me. But then I also recognize, and I don't think this plays a role, I'm really good at separating different versions of things, you know what I mean? But I do love the BBC's Sherlock, you know?
Yeah, I'm in the camp where I would prefer this version of Sherlock than Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock for me.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I'm nowhere near that. I think that number one, Downey in this role is great. And I liked like his cool, here's what I need to do. And then bing, bing, bing. And then he does it like Telltale's Batman games does that, where they show you how everything is going to play out and then it plays it out. I thought it was cool. It made for a great moment in Epic Rap Battles of History, in his second verse, he's like, this mustn't register on an emotional level. And I just gotta kill him in this way and this way. And first I gotta do this. And the way it played out here, it was cool.
Conclude with killer catchphrase.
I liked that they played with the concept of the supernatural, and they're like, yeah, no, Mark Strong is definitely a witch or a warlock. And they're like, but no, it can't be, because that's not the plot of this movie. So there's a mystery here. And I like it, while at the same time think it hurt, because I knew that there was nothing supernatural. So I knew that something needed to get revealed. And who was the other star? I'm blanking on her name right now.
Homegirl played from Yellowstone.
Irene Adler, Rachel McAdams.
Oh yeah, Rachel McAdams was in this one.
Yeah, I thought she was cool also. The plot to me, having been interested in Sherlock Holmes before and everything, it hurt this movie. But Law and Downey were enough to make me sit through it, watch it, and say, would I watch it again? Like randomly on one day, me be like, oh, let me put this on? Probably not. But if someone were putting it on or suggested it, I'd also be like, yeah, I'm game. You know, I thought it was fun. I think it's a fun time.
I feel that.
And, I think if a third one were to come out one day, I know I'm jumping ahead to a third one.
They're saying it should be another one.
I would want it to be more like this than what we got into. So do you want to jump into Game of Shadows?
No, that's fine. Yeah, for 2, bro, definitely the weaker link.
So let me share my beef with 2. You might disagree with me entirely.
Okay.
So 2, 2011 drops, and now I'm starting to feel like this version of the Sherlock Holmes character felt a little bit more Iron Man-y than the Sherlock Holmes from 2009.
That's a good take. That's healthy.
It felt like they're like, yo, you were actually fantastic in Iron Man 1 and 2. Can you lean into that while doing this? So I was pulled out, because now I feel like I'm seeing more Downey, which wasn't a good thing.
Yep.
And I also felt like, as much as they were together, I also feel like there was a little bit something lost with the Law and Downey here. And then the plot was weaker.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of feels like everything that they loved from the first one, let's do it again, just not as tight. And if I'm not mistaken, this plot, also having seen it before, done really well, because I'm pretty sure this was the plot of the second Sherlock season. Mm-hmm. I'm just left like, my enjoyment of it is not as high. And so where the first movie ended up at the 9 slot, this is the 11 for me in terms of my list. I don't necessarily think I would watch this one again, but I'm also a sucker who, when I start something, I got to do all of it. So if I ever did watch the last one again, I would have to watch this one again, and maybe my opinions would change. But I just think this is an overall weaker movie, and where the first one was enjoyable, I didn't feel that much here.
I feel that. And I think, but
I also were watching these alone, because I understand how watching with people can completely change your watching experience. So I don't know what you had.
I watched all these in theaters, so it's like seeing the scene when they're running from the tanks blowing up, and they put the camera in front of them. So it's like, there's certain cinematography choices that I think they did a better job at in this movie, but that's the only thing better. Everything else, like you said, the pacing, the relationship, the writing, all of it was much weaker. And it was like, if you already did it at a high level, you need to best yourself. And they didn't do much to best themselves outside of getting better shots because they had more production money because the first movie was successful. So they can make a second one. And now Robert Downey Jr. is blown up as Iron Man even more. So I understand what you're saying. Big time. I enjoyed Moriarty. I enjoyed Downey, man. I really do. I just do. I think there's writing in these Sherlock stories that allow Ritchie the opportunity. He like chose a character he can break the rules of what a normal narrative looks like. And I think he took that to places that were cool to see. And that's part of why I love Ritchie. I love him not because of what he does perfectly, but what he dares to try. And it sometimes lands flat. And then there are other times when I feel like there's actually a great payoff, you know. And another insanely, you know, paid off for sure movie for me from him is 2015's Man from U.N.C.L.E. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. We're looking at a Henry Cavill, however you say his last name, Cavill, you know, he's already popped out as Superman at this point. So we know him. You'd seen him prior, but that was what blew him up for real. Obviously, he's playing Superman. But then this movie comes out and it's a spy film. And in a world where there are 007s and Mission Impossibles, this retro aspect play on using the editing that he's using all of his movies to tell great stories and tell things out of order and tell things in a way that keep you captivated and at the edge of your seat. Applying that to Henry Cavill and Armie Hammer going at it and against each other in a very like retro, what's that game that came out that you shoot somebody in it and you die? Deathloop type vibe, you know, like that kind of vibe. I loved it. I love the cinematography. I love the writing. I love the acting. I love the pacing. This is actually a script I actually thought was one of his stronger scripts that he's ever made. It was just a good film. And every time this one is on, I watch it all the way through because it has everything a spy movie should have. Everything a spy movie should have, it has. And it dares to be a bit different than the normal. It hits the status quo while also challenging it at the same time. And I appreciate that about this as a spy movie. But I'll pass it over to you, bro. What do you think?
Well, we know The Man from U.N.C.L.E. is a movie based on the 1964 television series, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Right. So this is him bringing an old IP, coming back and saying, oh, let's do something with this in this genre that's being used in many different ways right now. And this is my favorite film from him, I believe. I think Cavill and Hammer just play very well off of each other. And then when you add Alicia, I believe her name is, into the mix, great stuff there. It was real fun to just see these dudes, you know, the American soldier and the Russian soldier, butt heads. And then all we got to work together, but they're still going to be petty while working together and against each other. And, you know, they call it dick measuring contest when they're always like popping out with the here like one of the scenes in the movie, I think Cavill pulls out like a knife to cut through a fence, and he's like, it's powered by this laser type technology. And then the Russian dude pulls out an actual laser, and he's like, I got this thing. And they go back and forth, one upping each other the entire film, to then at the end be tasked with like, all right, now get rid of the other one. And they're like, we don't really want to do that. I enjoyed it. I love spy movies. Funny enough, I actually haven't seen any of James Bond's. I haven't seen a single one.
That's insanity. You're bugged.
In my life.
Bugged out.
I just never have. You know, I always feel like it's wrong to start halfway through. So I got to go back. Whenever I plan on doing it, I'm talking about all the way back. Absolutely. I can't start with Daniel Craig.
No, sir.
So I just have needed to find the space to do that. And I've been wanting to do it because I love almost every spy movie I've ever seen. I've found some sort of enjoyment from it.
Yeah.
This is a movie that takes place decades ago, I love time period films. Time period films, even if they're not the best, if I'm in the mood and I feel like I'm in that time period, you got me. So this one was incredibly enjoyable. The leads mixing very well together, and overall a plot that entertained me. Now, what I do want to say is this ended where the TV show starts, and I can't help but feel like the more interesting film comes after everything we've seen in this movie, which hopes that like we get a sequel one day.
Yeah,
I hope we get something.
He's already said he's got that coming down the pipe.
Okay, so that's awesome, because like I like my review on Letterboxd, its final statement is what an enjoyable film, and I can only imagine how much more enjoyable it would be if it would have started where this one finished. So that's what I have to say about number one, and I feel like his style is here, but it's also very interesting that I feel like of all the films we've talked about so far, I felt his style here the least. And I don't know if you would agree or not.
I think it's just really dressed up in a way that feels mature. It feels really mature. He had to mature himself as a director to put this production on. And maybe it's because he adopted somebody else's material instead of writing his own. Sometimes that helps directors to rise to the occasion in a way they couldn't otherwise. Denis pushed himself with all those adaptations. I mean, same with Oppenheimer, you know what I mean? So at the end of the day, I just think this is a special film, and it's like, if it were an original IP, it would be even more special for sure. But this is still very special for Ritchie. So I agree with you big time. I loved it. If you haven't seen that movie, you should go back. That's one of the ones I say you should definitely go watch. You can watch it at any point. Another one that I love came out 2 years later, and I'm biased. I don't give a crap. You can say whatever you want. When it comes to period films, like you're saying, a period I love is the medieval time, and I really enjoy anything that has to do with the Knights of the Round Table. So the Kingsman take on this old thing in the modern day, cool. But the notion of a group of men with a cause sitting around, discussing what they're going to do with their kingdom, or how they're going to stretch out upon territory of others and other places, steward this space that they have. This is a notion that exists in this movie. Royalty, who is in power, who is the king, who is just the lowly boy. And we all know the story. We all know the story of Arthur and the story of Excalibur and how he takes out the rock and then, wow. But what he does here is brings his style to play and gives us a coming of age film. And the coming of age film is fire. The coming of age notion does not conclude throughout this whole movie. I'm telling you, bro, I can talk about this movie until I am blue in the face. I could tell you about how Charlie Hunnam perfectly played this guy afraid of his past and then conquered it on screen in a movie he didn't have to be serious about. I felt like he didn't have to be serious at all in this film. He could have just been joking around. The dude has a freaking sword that makes him kill hundreds of dudes in like 3 swings. It's just unrealistic. Yet there are these very grounded moments. And I love this film for that. This is a movie that I would put, this is top 3, top 2 movies from Ritchie for me personally. I love the action. I love the brothers hiding in the caves. I love the establishment of the Knights of the Round Table. You sit at it. I love the way he would tell a story, like, tell me a story about some Vikings, some graffiti, and some, and then he tells the story of, well, basically this happened with him and this and joking around, but we're getting this flashback vibe, this vibe of the stories being told on camera right in front of us. There are also some insane action scenes in this movie. That whole thing of them running through Londanium's freaking streets trying to duck the guards while there's arrows flying that way and the flares that are powder flares up in the sky. Fire. We used to put the freaking soundtrack to that song on in the gym and just be like, like we love that movie. It was just such a good time. And I go back and watch this movie at least like twice a week. I mean, twice a year, I would say. I watch it at least. Yeah, I think in the last 3 months, I've watched it twice already. So it's one of those ones. I'm actually considering a tattoo. I'm considering a tattoo for this one. Ever since they put that on Netflix, bro, it was a wrap. I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna watch this back to back to back to back to back to back to back.
All right. Well, for anyone listening, bro, I just want to point out, I don't know if Ivy would have had a little sly dig towards the Kingsman films without a previous conversation him and I had, but I feel like he slid that in there just because he knows about something I'm going to talk about later. And he a cornball for that. He funny.
I think it's more of like a subconscious thing, but yeah, sure, whatever you want. I mean, bro, I got Knights of the Round Table tattoo on my
I'm
freaking
aware,
chest.
always. You've always loved the Knights of the Round Table, and I remember when this movie came out, you telling me, if anything, the soundtrack with that specific, you were like, I loved it. So for me, I also love medieval times. I've been watching movies more recently that depict this era. I was always big on Game of Thrones. I was never really big on Lord of the Rings, but Game of Thrones, really enjoyed. I'm loving House of the Dragon. And then earlier this year, I sat and watched some movies for the first time. The Green Knight, I believe it's called, right? Which is another, yep, that's the tattoo. And, so I had to watch this. And I'm going back and forth on my feelings on it. I think at the very least, it was incredibly enjoyable.
Yeah, it's a fun film.
Super fun. Charlie was fantastic. Law back again, I think, was really good. Aidan Gillian, Kingsley Benadier, they were cool in their side roles, as well as Digimon, I believe is how you pronounce his name. I love him in everything I see him in too. So the cast here was incredibly enjoyable. Eric Bana, I mean, I wish we had more of him, but there are points in this movie where I'm just like, why'd you go and do that?
What parts though? I'm like interested in that.
Well, first I want to talk about my favorite part of the movie being the backdrop of that music where they're running through the city and Guy Ritchie straight up puts his editing style to work, and it puts the camera right at this like under angle of the characters' heads, focused on them running throughout the city versus a wide pan
he did that
and all.
First in Game of Shadows.
Well, I feel like this is where he got it down dead ass. Like this is where he made it work.
Yeah.
To be, oh shoot, like the sound, like everything about the movie worked to make that moment happen. I agree. Soundtrack, actors, all of it. Predicament. Favorite part of the movie, probably. Part that made me question, like, why? Was once he really gets that sword on lock, and for maybe 15, 30 seconds, it just, in my opinion, you could crucify me if you like, it just turned into that ugly CG beatdown that he gives them, where he's swinging this. Like, I get it's meant to show power and how the Excalibur sword is turning him up and he's being able to do all of this, but it just, because of how terrible it looked to me, it took me out of it.
Sure.
Just the slowness of like ding, oh, like I was like, whoa,
sure,
this is what we've been building to. I'm mad now. Like I wish they would have just been able to put that execution a little bit better.
Sure.
Just to show that the sword and the power that it has, it shouldn't be a kind of sword to look at. But I know that if you're more locked in and if you're more feeling everything like you may be, it's easier to bypass. It's easier to look past that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more of like the movie didn't take itself seriously in any of the combat or the mysticism whatsoever. I mean, even the final fight is one where they got gritty in that space, and I appreciated that. But for the most part, it's like you got this flaming skull head that your boy Jude Law just turned into. Like it's supposed to feel fantasy in this medieval space, because that's filled with, that there's a level of magic that has always existed. So again, Ritchie's good about that. He finds these spaces where he can break rules and he can play around with like his own laws and rules, and then we just have to live by those. And I think in this movie, it leads to a great ride. I just appreciated the ride the first time. It's kind of like how I felt when I left Venom, or when I leave like a Transformers or a Fast Five. It was like, okay, this is a movie that's not going to win any awards, but I enjoyed from the beginning to end. I was having fun. Like, it was a good time. And I liked the story behind it. that was where it set itself apart. The flashback scene of the sword landing and his dad throwing it in the air, and then him catching it as like a moment of, I have faced my fears of losing my dad and my trauma, and I'm holding it with all of who I am as a man, but without saying it. He just did it through the camera. I'm like, okay, Ritchie, you're trying to be more mature with your approach. That sounds like some Denis shit, where it's like, dialogue isn't a necessity in order for me to get this message across. I like that he allowed his editing style to do something like that. He gave it room in a way that was mature, very mature, amidst this fun tale. So this contrast, it really plays a role. It was cool, man. I really liked it a lot, actually.
It was a fun time. It's fallen at 7 on my list, but I can see on a second watch anything really up past this shifting around. Sure, I think. Sure. I think anything past the 9, technically, sure. I could see switching up, moving around.
I don't have much to say about 2019's Aladdin. Me personally, Will Smith will never be my genie. It's not going to work. But at the end of the day, it's like, I mean, the film itself, here's what I liked about the film. I felt like Disney is doing this thing with the live action tales of these old stories, where they were giving different directors their chops and opportunities to bring their style and tell the story. You know, Beauty and the Beast had this beauty and class to it. Little Mermaid had a twist on it. You know, Aladdin had Guy Ritchie give an opportunity to feel the running through Agrabah as a thief type vibe in a way that was fitting and in a way that didn't feel inappropriate. It was a fun time. I thought it was a fun ride. He's a safe director at this point. He's not going to innovate in a way that's going to make us all go, let's give him an Oscar. But he understands the assignment, and he'll meet you with the assignment. Is he going to get an A+? I don't know about that. But this movie, it gets a solid B for me. It's like, that was a B. I wouldn't go back and be like, man, I wish I never watched this. And it was like, hey, that was actually a pretty good one. That was fun. That's how I felt about Aladdin.
Aladdin's at my number 2.
Wow.
And I think it's funny that, like, my number 1, Ritchie's style is at a minimum here. It's making me realize that his style may not be something I'm interested in. I think you talking about Will Smith like that is kind of foul, because I think it kind of downplays that he was able to not come into this role and try to replicate what was done, but make it his own thing. And I can respect when an actor does that.
It's Robin Williams.
It's Robin, of course, but everybody knows that, so you can give him his props without being like that. You know,
I'm
what I'm
not
saying?
hating on him. I'm just saying, bro. You're not my
bring
genie.
You could bring the positivity, bro. He's nobody's genie.
You might be the
He's
young generation's genie, but you're not my genie.
But that's okay,
you're not even
bro.
Your own genie,
because he managed to come in.
Genie.
That's foul. That's foul. You see, he being disrespectful for zero reason. He was given no reason to do that right now, y'all.
You kind of made it a thing, so I said it. Yeah,
being a funny guy. He just being a funny guy over here. Will Smith deserves his props for coming into the role, knowing that he would never be able to replicate what Robin Williams did, because that's a role that nobody was willing to take on but him.
Sure.
And make it his own thing. Solid performance.
Respect, bro. Hat tipped. 100%.
Masood as Aladdin was great.
He was beautiful.
He was fantastic.
He was born for it.
Naomi Scott as Jasmine was pretty damn cool.
I appreciated her. I like her on a lot of other things too.
Now, I don't want to, because I know I was just talking about being disrespectful and stuff, but I'm gonna make a joke, you know. Marwan Kenzari as Jafar on this most recent rewatch that I had in January. And nobody's going to understand unless you're part of a very specific group. This man reminded me of PG. I felt like I was looking at PG from the Some Bros channel the entire time, and I thought it was hilarious.
That's funny.
He was cool as Jafar, but I just couldn't stop seeing PG.
You were tripped up over it.
He looks just like PG. But anyway,
I feel that.
I thought that Aladdin, I think this is one of the better live action Disney adaptations.
Yes.
I haven't seen many. But I've really enjoyed this and Beauty and the Beast. I saw this one in theaters. This might be the only Guy Ritchie film I've seen in theaters.
Fire.
But that's because I love the original Aladdin, so I popped out to go watch this in the Palisades Mall, in fact. And yeah, bro, I just think it's very enjoyable. I think it's an enjoyable time. It does things a little bit differently that makes it a little bit more worth watching, like after seeing the original property. And Guy Ritchie, he was pretty solid. This was the film when I saw it here. I was like, oh shoot, he did this. But again, I just think it's interesting that Aladdin and now and my number one with The Man of U.N.C.L.E., I'm just like, why am I preferring the films that are less his style? So, and that can't be on me. Can I blame myself for the things that my brain decides to fuck with? I don't know.
We all made
right?
differently, bro.
So
we're all made differently with different opinions. You know what I mean?
Aladdin is one that I'll rewatch. And if someone was like, yo, you there? I'm like, yeah, tell me when you're watching that and I'll show up to watch it too.
I feel you. Okay, so 2019 was not just filled with Aladdin and Will Smith from Guy Ritchie. It was also on the back end of that year when The Gentleman came out. The Gentleman is a very smooth, new age gangster film starring Matthew McConaughey and a number of other like B and A level actors. Colin Farrell, what's the name of homeboy that Charlie Hunnam, what's his name? The guy who interviews him the entire time. Hugh Grant, Jeremy Strong, Michelle Dockery, Tom Wu, which we saw Tom Wu over in King Arthur, Henry Golding, Crazy Rich Asians. Like, we've got a lot of awesome actors and actresses that make up this film. And it's a story of how an investigator is trying to get to the bottom of a tale, and we're seeing it kind of flow out, this whole marijuana empire in London, and seeing how there's, warring factions and people switching up on the scenes and casualties and marriages and brotherhood and teenagers and drugs and life and funniness and great editing and action scenes. And it all just kind of comes together, similar to Lock, Stock, and Barrel, similar to Snatch. This has that stitching where there's a lot of different characters involved in the tale. And just think he's really good at layering on this one. That's what I think he discovered and made really great in this particular film when it comes to playing with the editing style and the timing of things. He layers tales on top of each other in a really cool way in this movie. He somehow makes you interested in the next character he's introduced you to the story of, because it's another layer of the story. So from the beginning of the movie, you're hearing about this tale, and I just love it. You want to get to the end of another Ritchie tale, another Ritchie story, and you're looking at great actors and actresses while they're doing it. It never gets old seeing Matthew McConaughey being on a badass in a nice ass suit selling weed. It's just fire. The concept is crazy. There's a reason why they brought it over to Netflix for a TV show. There's a reason why this is one of those IPs that returned again. And it's not just because Matthew McConaughey was on the front of the film. I think Ritchie had the respect of Hollywood at this point in time. And this movie was one of those ones that I don't think it did anything wrong for him at all. I think it was only a good thing for him as a director. And I enjoyed it. It was a good film. But I'll pass it over to you. What did you think about The Gentleman?
This one falls in at the number 4 for me. I liked it. I don't want to say that this was a spy movie.
Nah.
But it reminded me of a few spy movies in some way, in some weird, like, if that makes sense. Like, something about it gave off, like, this feels like it should be a spy movie. But I just think it's the swag that the characters carry with them. I feel like I only am reminded of it when it comes to spy stuff.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the actors in this. I want to watch the show. I haven't been able to catch the show yet. I had to do my movies first. Show comes later. But I'm interested in the show, which, if I weren't, then it would be on the movie. So, but yeah, I just think that this was a good old enjoyable time. Popcorn bowl on my left, Soda on the right.
Mm.
And I'm gonna dive into it, bro. I think you hit it on the head. His style is here. I liked the way he was jumping back and forth. The movie starts with something that doesn't happen until an hour and 30 minutes into the movie, and they uncover the layers of what exactly happened. And okay, that happened. Oh, that happened because of this. Okay, that's why Charlie's there now. Oh, okay. I like the mystery unfolding. I like the concept of the interviewer being there. And so what happened to this? And why are we doing this? I wasn't overly fond of his literally talking. Like, I know it's part of the movie, but as the movie, like, cut to this, and then it would cut to that. And what about this? And then the filter goes, but it's style, and it's the style that I know Ritchie, that people like of him. So I respect it. I respect why people enjoy this filmmaker like this, you know? Just, again, I don't know if it's for me, but it's at the 4 spot. So,
word.
I'll go through with this now, unless you want me to wait.
Sure.
You know, watching these films, I think made me realize that I really do enjoy a different director, Matthew Vaughn, a lot. Which is why it was incredibly funny to see that Vaughn and Ritchie are pretty close friends. They're like best friends. They started, you know, Vaughn was a producer on his first 3 films. You know, he helped Ritchie produce the Lock, Stock, Snatch, and Swept Away. But they're friends, and they have been very vocal about how they have kept their friendship close, where they be helping each other in small ways. Like, yo, yeah, you should do that. Like, they be hyping each other up. So I thought that was cool, and I feel like that line kind of made sense because again, I'm thinking of this off of my own, not knowing any of this. I'm like, why is Guy Ritchie making me feel like I appreciate Vaughn more in a weird way? And so to see this, I'm like, they might just have similar styles in certain aspects, or there might be things about them that just are connected that we can just feel. So I hope to do a Matthew Vaughn episode one day where I can explain more about that, because I don't want to do that fully here. I don't want to take the spotlight from Guy Ritchie. But this is the film where I think I felt that heavily, or I was like, ooh, I think maybe this is how I feel at this point.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm interested to get there whenever we do.
Wasn't mentioning Kingsman and knock that point before you say it. You can say I'm corny if you
bro,
want.
I'm just saying, for bro. Me, it was pretty funny.
For me, I can understand why they're friends. I think that there's weaknesses and strengths in both parties. I think I'm a sucker for good editing every time. I just like time manipulated. I'm biased in that regard. It's because of the Nolan fan in me, 100%. So I think when it comes to movies like Wrath of Man, 2021, where we're getting another opportunity to see the same pieces on the table, sicking Jason Statham after a particular antagonist on some sort of a vendetta mission. That's Guy Ritchie's special sauce at this point. You know what I mean? Just throw some Statham in there. It's like A1 sauce on steak, but for film. For Ritchie films. And yet, I'm expecting here comes another Jason, and it was refreshing. I remember watching this film. We rented it and watched it at my in-laws' house in Jersey, and Fran and I were sitting there, and I didn't expect Fran to like it because it was an action film. She likes movies where there's crime and bloods and murder and who did it and who done it type style. But she was eating this up. The suspense of the combat, the gunfire, the real mission he was on, and the fact that we didn't even know his mission throughout each part of the story until a certain point where you're like, oh, wow, this is unfolding for me the same way it's unfolding for him in certain regards. I like when Ritchie does that, when Ritchie uses time to pull us closer and say, stick around, I'm going to drop something on you. And then when it comes, it was worth waiting for it. I like when he strings it along like that through the editing and the pacing and the montages and the stories and the flashbacks and all that. So I like this film, and I loved it for Statham. As somebody at this point, it's 2021. I've seen Statham in every type of Liam Neeson-esque movie where he is overcoming all the bad guys and killing them all. this movie had more of a nuance to it for Statham, and I appreciated that. And I think he wrote it well. It was different. He had a different countenance the whole film, and I felt like it was because he was set up for something a little bit different this time. Appreciate that, Ritchie. Another one. This is top 3 for me. This is my 3rd favorite for sure from him. So
this is also my 3rd favorite.
Yeah.
In fact, it was number 1, and then I was like, I need to watch The Man from U.N.C.L.E. again, and then The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was like, no, this is your 2nd watch now, so you know I'm up there for you, so maybe I got to hit the 2nd watch for Wrath of Man. Wrath of Man jumped down to 3rd because I really enjoyed Aladdin. Taken, again, one of my all-time favorites. You know, I will still sit here and tell you it's my number 1, even if I can name 10 other movies that are better than it that I would probably rather rewatch on any day. Taken is just, the way I explain Taken now, it's like Hall of Fame retirement that can now not really move from that top spot.
It hung up the jersey.
So
the jersey.
just know that the jersey is hung up there. You know, I may not speak about it as much as I did 10 years ago, but just know it's retired and it's up there. And I was getting Taken vibes here. And I was locked in, enjoyed the entire movie. Every time they peeled back a layer on the story that took place before what you've already seen, and now it adds a light onto the scene we watched before, and we understand why Statham was shooting Post Malone in the face. You know, like, I just enjoyed the hell out of this super simple story. I don't think it's disrespectful to say that this story is incredibly simple.
Yeah, no, not at all.
And I think it's great for it. You know, and I think, again, Guy Ritchie's style might not necessarily be my thing if the simple story that he's crafted is up there for me. I just liked the chapter book storytelling here. Sure. You know, the simplicity made the plot land for me where I haven't really felt like that for most of these films. Sure. Statham was fun in his role. You know, I haven't seen all of the Fast and Furious films. You know, I've seen the first one and I didn't really like it. And I've seen clips from the other ones and I didn't really care to ever go and watch those movies. They don't appeal to me. And he's in those, so I haven't had a lot of exposure to Statham. So seeing him in this role was enjoyable for me because it gives me an idea of who he might be as an actor outside of those. And he takes himself very seriously, it seems.
It felt serious.
This one was a real fun one. I'm down to rewatch this again anytime, really. This one was just... like I said, the chapter book that peels the layer back and then puts even more interest down and then changes the perspective of the story. I like stories that change perspective. I've always enjoyed those stories, you know, from video games to TV shows to all of that.
That's why I think it's interesting that, like you say, when he's least like himself, you're into it, because I feel like he uses the editing and timelines and montages to give us a new perspective, to give us different perspectives in a way that you can't do. You would have to build up. It's rule breaking, bro. He rule breaks through montage, through skippage of scenes. You know, you're seeing gaps in time, yet somehow in your head you're like, that makes sense. It makes sense that led to this. Somehow I just watched 30 seconds of a bunch of random scenes and understood what would have taken 30, 40 minutes for you to show me piece by piece in the film. He uses that so often to tell his stories that he that's his main vehicle for a lot of points of development and stuff. So, you know, it's interesting that you don't like when he does that, or it's not something that you like, oh, you know. But I respect it.
I just think it's this one was just handled very simply. And sometimes less is more. And I think that's kind of what I felt with this one.
I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't watch 2023's Operation Fortune. It's one of those ones that I need to watch because I've seen all these other ones, but I didn't see that one. So do you have much to say on that movie? Or can we just kind of get right to The Covenant?
I just want to quickly hit for this one. This one might feel like another popcorn flick. But this one was number 10, so I don't know if I would ever really want to watch this one again. Statham was cool, but again, I've already seen Wrath of Man, and I like that over there. This one was kind of a spy-ish,
yeah, for sure,
like series.
He's actually a spy.
Aubrey Plaza was okay. I think this feels like another one of her movies where the shtick is kind of there. You know, her whole vibe. You know, her vibe that she's famously known for. Yeah. It feels like it's here. some of the combat choreography in this, it was very Liam Neeson-y, bro. And I'm not going to sit here and say Liam Neeson is great at the combat, but it's Liam Neeson, and I'm not there yet with Jason Statham. But Hugh Grant was back, and you know who was in this one that made me stick around for the whole movie, bro? Pierre Despereau.
Of course.
So I'm sticking there, bro.
I think his name is.
It's like Ooze, you know, like Robin Hood, Pierre Despereau.
Yeah, I'm excited to see him in Ungentlemanly Warfare.
So I love him. So when he's there, I lock in. This one had it. Josh Hartnett was in this, and I want to see more of him because I enjoyed him here, and I enjoyed him in Oppenheimer. So remember earlier, I'm saying I'm trying to find these actors in other roles. I felt that here for Josh Hartnett.
Sure.
So other than that, popcorn flick. I personally wouldn't really want to watch it again.
Word.
But yeah, we can jump into The Covenant.
All right, bet. So The Covenant's our final movie. Last thing that he's released outside the TV show that came out this year for The Gentleman. You know, this is one of those ones that's unlike everything else that he's ever made. And it worked out for his benefit. You know, Jake Gyllenhaal is a fantastic actor, but he's also partnered and paired with Dar Salim in this movie, which this is one of his biggest movies that he's done ever as an actor. And you would never guess that. This film is majorly carried by these two characters, mainly Dar Salim, if I'm honest with you. I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal is Jake Gyllenhaal. He's always going to command the screen. He's a beast. He's slept on. He's another critically and criminally slept on actor, like we've said.
I said this when we were talking about Denis.
When we were talking about Prisoners.
For Prisoners.
Yeah. But this movie is fantastic. It's about war and what you're fighting for. What are you fighting for? What have you sworn to fight for? What is respect? What deserves your respect because you've given your word to it? And what does it look like for someone else to have that same strength as you all the way across the world? That same desire to stand by that principle. I loved it. It was human. It was a war story. It still had the editing, still had the montage, still had moments where Ritchie was getting that off. But at the same time, he took time to build a meaningful Bond story that was kind of tied together by their friendship, by their respect for one another. That's at the core of the movie from the beginning to the end. And it is the reason why I would watch this movie again. And I thought it wasn't that long. I thought it was actually like pretty well paced too. I was like, oh, it's over already. 22 hours. That's kind of crazy. I think Ritchie's only gotten better, bro. That's my last thoughts on Ritchie on the other end of that. But let me hear what you think about The Covenant.
I think that it's my number 5. I like Gyllenhaal, bro. I do. I want to see more of him in roles that treat him as the head of the cast. My favorite part of this movie was when they're stealthily taking dudes out. You know, when they're having to maneuver through the hills and they're commenting with each other with just hand cues and small sounds. Yeah. I don't know if I'm crazy about films like this or not. I don't think I've been exposed to enough of these kind of modern day war films. You know, like American Sniper, I know people are big on, haven't seen that. But this one it kept me locked in. I was interested in will I watch it again? I'm not sure, but I don't think that has to do with the quality of the film. I just think it has to do with the film's genre and just...
Yeah, I mean, you said similarly about Sicario. Like Sicario was one of those ones that you don't care for that type of movie. This had a Sicario vibe to me, just not with the Mexican border. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's topic also. You know, I think that it's okay to say that you won't rewatch a good film. Like Logan is a film that I will rarely rewatch just because of the heaviness that it brings with it. And I could see that falling somewhere here in some aspects. But I enjoyed it, to say. Like, I would recommend, hey, have you seen The Covenant? I think you should watch it.
Absolutely. And it had the Finder in that. I think.
You know who else it had? Not that you watched the show, but Anthony Starr, Homelander from The Boys, who I hope after The Boys gets put out there more than just so that he could be more than just Homelander, because he's a phenomenal actor. So damn, I missed The Finder, bro. Sheesh. I can't say whether or not Guy Ritchie has gotten better as time has gone on, but I think he's become more comfortable doing him. I think that's what I can say about him. He's become more comfortable just telling what he wants to tell instead of trying to make other people happy. And I can respect that from a director completely. But in terms of the capability of making a film, bro, I'm not mad if people were to say that Snatch is his all-time best, or if his first film is his all-time best. But like I said, for me, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., that's been my favorite so far, and I'm happy to hear that he might be continuing to take that along. And the streets are saying if they do Aladdin 2, he would be back for that too. So I mean, I'm happy, I guess, right? So
I think at the end of the day, Ritchie is going to be a formidable individual. He's now stretched himself into TV shows through Netflix. Wouldn't be surprised if they give him another TV show and he does some more TV. And I'm hearing that everything that you may not like about his movies, with their pacing and their speed, that the TV show having 8 episodes gives it even more room for him to explore that and get deeper into that. Right. So that's what excites me. I heard it was very tough.
Yeah, I mean, you'll hear my thoughts come our 2024 TV recap. I'm gonna definitely check that out. You know, if I were to say getting into Guy Ritchie, you know, a little bit of a who is he? I mean, I think if you've heard anything, it's he has an editing flair that's unique and that people might find enjoyment from. But compared to other directors, you know, I think from the 3 we've spoken about so far here on CUZZO-OP, he is the most, for me, split down the middle, where I feel like it's completely understandable if someone didn't like his style or did.
Sure. Yeah, I think he's a blue collar director. Yeah. I think he's a director that's just, and anybody would flick on a movie and maybe watch. Versus Nolan, he asks you to invest yourself in his films. Same with Denis. So some people would rather watch a Guy Ritchie film than a Denis or a Nolan film. It's all subjective at the end of the day. But for me, these are my top 3, and that's why I was glad to go through this whole filmography. We are looking forward to the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Actually, I'm supposed to cop my ticket soon. I'm looking forward to this one. I'm looking forward to seeing Cavill in this role. I'm glad we're getting Jack Reacher in that movie as well. He brings back homeboy from Crazy Rich Asians, Henry. He brings back Carrie Ewells. We're getting people we've seen before in Ritchie's universe come and play different characters and play them in new ways. And we're getting a ragtag gang batch of people working together to accomplish one goal. I'm sure it's going to be great because he doesn't fail at those types of movies. It's how he's playing by his own rules. So I guess that's another way to say that he's gotten comfortable in his own skin as a director, like you said. So definitely agree with you. What I would like to look and see from him more often is more serious films. If every 3 films we get something that he's paying homage and an adaptation to, one that's more fun and he's having, you know, kind of his strengths be played to, and then something that pushes him out of his element, I would never be upset with that lineup. I like that. I think places where he's taken risks were some of his best. So if you're looking for a movie to jump into that says Guy Ritchie on it, check out The Covenant, check out Man from U.N.C.L.E., check out King Arthur, check out Aladdin. You know, you can jump in with the fam at any point. That's what's also cool. So, yeah, man, this has been another episode of CUZZO-OP where we go through the filmography of a director, and we're thinking about actors now. We're thinking about how do we go through a lineup of a bunch of different movies. What about you? What's your favorite Guy Ritchie film? Let us know in the comments. Tell us what you liked about that movie, where you think he shines as a director, or if you think he's complete crap. That's where we like to see the communication on the bottom of YouTube videos, responding to our Spotify. If you know someone that likes to hear people talk about TV, movies, and video games, send them over to the podcast. Send them over to CUZZO-OP Linktree. Like, show some love. That's what it's all about for us. Organic growth. And just know every time that you tap into an episode of CUZZO-OP, you'll find these things. 2 cousins, 1 podcast, and endless entertainment. Till next time.